That night, I stood under the parking lot lights of the family trust building, pulling up my sleeve to show him the new bruises. He swallowed, looking at me like I had said something disrespectful. She's just trying her best. In that moment, I understood the truth was not just hidden. It was being protected by those afraid to lose their comfortable lives. I was no longer seeking justice for myself. I would dismantle the gilded cage my stepmother built around that house. My name is Autumn Dixon. I am 27 years old, and I live in Riverton, Colorado, at Marrow and Wick. My job is to build strategies, to find the core of a story, and wrap it in language that makes people believe. I shape narratives for billion-dollar companies. I know, better than anyone, how to make the truth malleable. But I was unprepared for the moment my own truth became the thing being manipulated. The Calder Trust meeting had been suffocating. It was held in the glass-walled conference room on the top floor, a sterile box designed to make you feel exposed. I had sat there, a non-voting commissioner on my own family's board, listening to my stepmother, Vivian Hale, charm the other members with projections and philanthropic synergy. I watched the numbers on the screen, but my mind was fixed on the throbbing pain under the sleeve of my silk blouse. When the meeting finally broke, I did not head to my car. I waited in the concrete chill of the parking garage, tucked near the elevator bank, letting the smell of cold exhaust and curing cement settle in my lungs. The sodium lights buzzed, casting everything in a sickly orange glow. I heard the ding of the elevator, followed by the sharp, confident steps of expensive Italian leather on concrete. Noah Briggs. He was still my boyfriend, technically, but for the past 3 months, he had also become Vivian's peripheral legal counsel. He stopped when he saw me, his smile faltering. "Autumn? What are you doing lurking in the dark? I thought you'd be gone." "We need to talk." He sighed, loosening his tie, the picture of a man burdened by duty. "It was a rough meeting, I know, but the projections look solid. Vivian is stabilizing things. You should be grateful." "Grateful," I repeated. The word was flat, dead in the damp air. "I want to show you something, Noah." I did not wait for his permission. I stepped closer, into his personal space, close enough to smell the expensive sandalwood cologne I had bought him for Christmas. I turned my arm and pushed up the cuff of my blouse, bearing the mottled purple and yellow stain on my forearm. He flinched. His eyes, the ones I used to think were so kind, darted from the bruise to my face and then away, toward the exit ramp, as if calculating his escape. "Jesus, Autumn," he muttered, stepping back. "Did you fall?" "She pushed me," I said, my voice low and shaking, hating the tremor in it. "At the hospital, I tried to see Dad, and Vivian blocked the room. When I argued, she grabbed me, and she shoved me against the doorframe." This was the moment. This was the moment the man who claimed to love me, the lawyer who supposedly valued justice, would wrap me in his arms and say, "I will fix this." Instead, Noah Briggs swallowed, adjusted his $1,000,000 watch, and looked at me with an expression of profound, weary disappointment, as if I were the problem. "Autumn," he said, his voice the one he used on difficult clients. "She's just trying her best." The garage seemed to tilt. The buzzing of the lights intensified, drowning out my heartbeat. "Trying her best?" "She's under incredible strain," Noah continued, gaining momentum now that he had found his narrative. "Your father, Richard, his stroke, it's been 3 months. 3 months of him being in that coma. She's running the trust, managing the company, and dealing with the grief of watching her husband waste away. She's depressed. You shouldn't be provoking her." Provoking her? The word landed like a slap, harder than Vivian's shove. The scene from 2 days ago played back in my mind. No longer a fuzzy memory of anger, but a sharp, cold sequence of events. I was standing outside room 408 at St. Bryn. I could hear the rhythmic, artificial whoosh of the ventilator that was breathing for my father. Vivian was standing in the doorway, wearing a cream-colored cashmere suit, her perfume thick enough to taste. "You can't go in, Autumn," she'd said, her voice a placid, synthesized whisper. I am his daughter. My visitation hours are approved. He needs rest. Your energy is too agitated. It's not good for him. My energy, Vivian, let me by. I tried to move past her. She put a hand on my chest. I brushed it away, and then it happened. It was not a frantic push. It was a calculated shove, a transfer of power. Her hand grabbed my forearm, nails digging in, the source of the bruise, and she used her weight to slam me backward. My shoulder blade and elbow hit the solid oak of the door jamb opposite. The pain was sharp, stealing my breath. You are upsetting everyone, she hissed, her face a mask of serene concern. Go home. Calm down. Come back when you can be supportive. She had then gently closed the door to my father's room, leaving me alone in the hallway, stinging with humiliation and rage. My first coherent thought was, the camera. There was a security dome right above the door. I went straight to the nurse's station. The charge nurse, a woman I did not recognize, gave me a polite, empty smile. I need to report an incident. I need you to pull the security footage from the corridor outside 408. I'm sorry, ma'am, she said, tapping at her computer. That camera appears to be offline. A system glitch. We're waiting on maintenance. I stared at her. That's convenient. Is there anything else I can help you with? Where is Nurse Ramirez? Maria Ramirez. She's usually on this wing. Maria was a friend, a kind woman who had known my father for years. The charge nurse's smile tightened. Nurse Ramirez was reassigned to the pediatric wing. Her shift was changed rather unexpectedly. A coincidence. Another coincidence. My stomach turned cold. This was not chaos. This was control. I snapped back to the parking garage. Noah was looking at his phone, already mentally moving on. Noah, I said, my voice hard. You are legal counsel for the trust. This is assault. I am telling you, as a member of this family, that the acting chairperson assaulted me to deny me access to my father. You have to do something. He looked up, and the warmth was gone. He was all lawyer. Autumn, my duty is to the Calder Trust, to the entity, not to interpersonal family disputes. If I were to get involved, it would be a massive conflict of interest. A conflict of interest, I repeated, tasting ash. So you're choosing her. I am choosing stability. I am choosing what your father would have wanted. He built this trust to be secure. Vivian is honoring that. You are acting like a child. He did not even say he was sorry. He just straightened his tie, gave me one last look of pity, and walked away. His footsteps echoed, loud and definitive, until they were swallowed by the sound of his car engine starting. I stood there for a long time, the cold of the concrete seeping into my shoes. I was alone, completely alone. My boyfriend, my father's allies, the systems meant to protect, all of them were aligned against me. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a harsh, sudden buzz. I pulled it out, expecting a conciliatory text from Noah. It was an unknown number, a single message. Want to see what trying her best really looks like? 3:17 a.m., records room, floor B, St. Bryn. I stared at the screen, my blood running colder than the garage air. 3:17 in the morning, floor B, the basement. I drove home on autopilot, the Riverton streets blurring past, my apartment, usually a sanctuary of warm woods and soft fabrics, felt like a glass box. I was being watched. I was paranoid. I went to the study, to the heavy antique safe built into the wall behind a framed photo of my father and me at a baseball game. He was laughing, his arm around me. I was 16. It was before Vivian. It was before the trust became a weapon. My fingers found the familiar tumblers. The code was my mother's birthday. The heavy door swung open with a soft thud. I had expected documents, a will, a letter, something. My father was a meticulous man. He would have had a contingency plan. But the safe was empty. Almost. In the small, velvet-lined tray where he kept spare keys, there was a single object I did not recognize. It was a small, ornate key, the kind for a safety deposit box. It was silver, and the head of it was carved into the shape of a small, delicate swallow. I picked it up. It was cold and heavy. A key to what? I closed the safe, the feeling of defeat settling heavily in my chest. I had nothing, a bruise they said I deserved, a cryptic text from a stranger, and a useless key. That night, sleep was a battle. When I finally fell, it was into a strange, vivid dream. I was not at the hospital or the parking garage. I was in my father's office at the Northway headquarters. He was sitting behind his massive oak desk, not in a hospital gown, but in his favorite blue suit. He looked healthy. He looked at me, his eyes sharp and clear, and he smiled. He did not speak. He just lifted his hand and tapped the surface of the desk. Tap, tap, tap. It was our signal. He had taught it to me when I was struggling with advanced calculus. "You're attacking the problem from the wrong angle," he would say. "You're trying to break down the wall. Stop, look for the door." 3 taps. Change your perspective. I woke up at 4 in the morning. The dream was gone, but the clarity remained. I had been fighting Vivian's way, with emotion, with accusations, with raised voices. I was a PR strategist, trying to win an argument in a bar. I had been stupid. Vivian's power came from the image of her grief. My power would come from the facts of her actions. I sat up, turned on my lamp, and went to work. My first act was to pick up my phone. I went to the photo I had taken of my arm in the harsh fluorescent light of my bathroom 2 days ago. Right after the hospital. The bruise was stark, undeniable. I saved it to a secure cloud server, then emailed it to my work address. Creating a timestamp, I wrote a single line in the body of the email. Incident at St. Bryn, 2:45 p.m., witnessed by Vivian Hale. I then forwarded the email to Noah's personal address with the subject line, "For your records." I would get no more witnesses. I would create a record. My second act was to open my laptop and order the best micro recorder on the market. 1-day shipping. It was small enough to fit in my palm, in a pocket, in a zipped wallet. From now on, my memory would be perfect. My third act was to pull up the hospital duty roster I had downloaded last week. I found Maria Ramirez's name. I also found the name of the new charge nurse. I then texted a friend, a young resident named Chloe I had met at a fundraiser. Weird question. I wrote, "Can you pull the St. Bryn nursing rosters for the ICU wing for the last 3 months? And the maintenance logs for the 4th floor cameras?" My phone buzzed minutes later. That's specific and weird. Give me an hour. I closed the laptop. My father had taught me to look for the door, but Vivian had locked the door and hidden the key. Fine. I would stop arguing. I would stop demanding. I would document. I would build a new key, piece by piece, out of data, and I would tear her gilded cage apart from the outside. I looked at the bruise on my arm, the color already starting to fade from angry purple to a muddy green. "She's trying her best," I whispered to the empty room, tasting the irony. A cold, hard resolve settled over me. So am I. To understand what I was fighting, you have to understand the Calder Trust. It was not a charity, not really. It was a fortress. My father, Richard Calder, had built it decades ago, on paper. It was a family philanthropic fund. In reality, it was a holding company, a meticulously designed legal entity whose sole purpose was to own and protect the controlling shares of Northway Storage and Freight. Northway was my grandfather's legacy and my father's life's work. It was an empire of cold concrete and colder air, a network of refrigerated warehouses spanning the federal interstate system. Northway stored everything from pharmaceuticals to government food surplus. It was critical infrastructure, and it was worth billions. The trust was the lock, and Northway was the vault. And for the last 3 months, Vivian Hale had held the only key. Her power was absolute, granted by a temporary power of attorney Richard had signed years ago, in a moment of marital bliss, never imagining it would be activated by a massive stroke that left him silenced in a coma. With that document, Vivian had become the acting chairwoman of the trust. She controlled my father's vote. She controlled Northway. My position was decorative. Non-voting commissioner, a title my father had given me as a birthday present, a way to get me in the room so I could learn the business. It meant I was allowed to sit at that glass table and watch Vivian dismantle his legacy, but I was not allowed to speak. I was scenery. Noah's position was more complicated. He wasn't on staff at the trust, not directly. His firm was retained for peripheral legal guidance. It was a neat little box that allowed him to advise Vivian on trust matters without technically being her employee. It also meant he reported directly to her, and only to her. He was her legal shield, and he was using it against me. The first thread I pulled was the audit, every single year. On the 1st of October, the Calder Trust underwent a rigorous internal audit. It was my father's obsession. Trust, but verify, he would say, especially when it comes to family. I had emailed the trust's CFO, a man named Arthur Vance, asking for the preliminary audit schedule. His reply was prompt and sterile. Dear Ms. Dixon, per the acting chairwoman's directive, the annual audit has been postponed indefinitely, pending a full migration to a new internal accounting system. A system migration, the oldest excuse in the corporate playbook. You could hide anything in a system migration. You could hide a rounding error, or you could hide a heist. The email sent a chill through me. I forwarded it to a private, encrypted address and then deleted the original. I needed more than a hunch. I needed context. I found it over lukewarm tea with Eleanor Pike. Eleanor had been my mother's best friend. She was a tough, sharp-boned woman who ran the largest private equity firm in Colorado, and she was one of the few people in Riverton who saw Vivian for what she was. We met at a sterile coffee shop far from the financial district, the kind with bad art and acoustic music. You look terrible. Autumn, she said, stirring her tea, her bracelets clinking. She did not bother with pleasantries. I feel terrible, Eleanor. I told her about the audit. I told her about Noah. I did not tell her about the bruise. Eleanor set her spoon down with a sharp clink. Of course she postponed it. That's her move. What move? What do you mean? Before she was Vivian Hale, wife of Richard Calder, she was Vivian Maddox, executive director of the Denver Children's Fund, a small, wealthy nonprofit. Within 2 years, it was bankrupt, utterly insolvent. I stared at her. I never knew that. How? Sloppy reporting, the board said. Tragic mismanagement. But I knew one of the auditors. He told me the books hadn't just been cooked. They'd been incinerated. There were ghost vendors, inflated invoices, donations that went in one day and out the next. But by the time anyone noticed, Vivian was gone, and the auditor who found the discrepancies was suddenly under investigation himself for malpractice. She bought him, Eleanor said, her voice dropping. She buried him in legal fees until he signed a non-disclosure agreement and recanted his findings. She doesn't just steal, Autumn, she silences. Eleanor leaned in, her eyes pinning me. She will not just take your father's money. She will erase his legacy, and she will erase you. Her words confirmed my fears. I went home and logged into the trust's commissioner portal. My access was limited, but I could still see high-level expenditures. I clicked on the administrative budget line. It was a sea of numbers, but one category jumped out: guardian care and consultation. In the last 3 months, since my father's stroke, the spending in that category had skyrocketed by over 300%. It was an astronomical sum. Tens of thousands of dollars a week. Who was she consulting? What guardian care cost that much? I cross-referenced the vendor codes listed next to the payments. Most were opaque, just numbered corporations. But one, St. Bryn Medical Services, was listed with payments that did not match any hospital bill I had seen. This led me back to the hospital, back to the camera. My friend, Chloe, the resident, had come through. She sent me a secure file containing the nursing rosters and the maintenance logs. This is weird. Autumn. Her message read, that whole wing's camera system was flagged for priority replacement the day after your dad was admitted. The work order was signed off by administration, not facilities. Who got the contract? I texted back. A third-party vendor. Precision Digital Security. Never heard of them. I had seen a version of that name in the trust's payment history. I spent the next 2 hours digging through Colorado's Public Business Registry. Precision Digital Security was a limited liability company, registered just 6 months prior. The registered agent, the only name on the public file, was a man named Darren Hale, Vivian's cousin. Vivian was paying her own cousin through the Calder Trust, with funds earmarked for guardian care, to manage the security cameras on the 4th floor of St. Bryn, the same camera that had malfunctioned at the exact moment she assaulted me. My hands were shaking. This was not a coincidence. This was a conspiracy. I needed to know what the hospital knew. I scheduled a meeting with St. Bryn's in-house counsel, a man named Gregory Shaw. I presented myself as a concerned daughter, simply trying to navigate the hospital's bureaucracy. Shaw's office was small, filled with beige filing cabinets. He was a man who looked permanently tired. "Ms. Dixon," he said, folding his hands, "we at St. Bryn offer our deepest sympathies. Your father's condition is tragic." "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice soft. "I'm having some trouble with the visitation authorization. It seems my access has been restricted. I am his only daughter. I am his healthcare proxy." He shuffled some papers, avoiding my eyes. "Ah, yes, we have your proxy directive on file. However, it appears that upon admittance, Mrs. Hale provided a more recent, superseding document, a general power of attorney that grants her full authority over his visitation schedule. Among other things, as the acting guardian, she has streamlined the access list to minimize his stimulation." "Streamlined it to just her," I stated. "She is his wife. The hospital's position is to honor the most current legal directive presented to us. We cannot get involved in a family disagreement. Even if that directive is being used to isolate a patient? Even if the security systems meant to protect him are being serviced by the guardian's own family?" Shaw's eyes snapped up to mine. The tiredness was gone, replaced by a cold, professional alarm. "Ms. Dixon, I am not sure what you are implying. Our vendor contracts are confidential, and the visitation directive is legally sound. If you have a dispute with Mrs. Hale's authority, you will have to take that up with the court." He was stonewalling me. He was protecting the hospital, and the hospital was protecting Vivian. I left his office and walked to the parking garage, the same one where Noah had dismissed me. I sat in my car, the pieces clicking into place, forming a picture so ugly I could barely look at it. The postponed audit, the inflated care budget, the phony camera contract, the altered visitation rights. Vivian was not just protecting her grief. She was protecting her newfound power. She needed to be in control of the trust. The trust's power was tied to my father's voting shares, and those shares were only hers as long as my father was in a coma. My blood ran cold. She did not just want him to stay in a coma. She needed him to. I felt a vibration. My phone. Another text from the anonymous number. "The file cabinet in Floor B isn't the only thing that's broken." Floor B. The records room. The message was pulling me back to the hospital, but the implication was clear. The camera wasn't the only broken thing. The system was broken. The care was broken. My father was in danger. As if on cue, another message popped up. This one was from Noah. His name on my screen made my stomach clench. "Autumn, I heard you were at the hospital talking to Greg Shaw. You need to stop. You are digging into things you do not understand. Don't make this a public fight. You will lose." It was a threat, veiled in the language of concern. He was part of it. He was her enforcer. My fingers flew across the screen. I'm well aware. I took a screenshot of the exchange and saved it to my secure server. When I got home, I did not turn on the lights. I went to my study and pulled out the large whiteboard I used for complex campaign strategies at Marrow and Wick. I uncapped a black marker. This was not a family dispute. This was a hostile takeover. I drew a box at the top and wrote, "Vivian." I drew lines radiating out. One line went to Noah, Legal Shield Enforcer. Another went to see Bryn, Access Medical Control. A line from the hospital went to Darren Hale, Surveillance/Blackout. A line from Vivian went to the Calder Trust, Money/Power, and another to Arthur Vance, Audit/Cover-Up. I was at the bottom, a single box labeled Autumn, with no lines connecting me to anything. I stared at the map. This was the web of power. My job at Marrow and Wick was to deconstruct a narrative. Now, I had to deconstruct a conspiracy. Eleanor was wrong. Vivian was not just silencing people. She was building a machine. My father was a patient, but to Vivian, he was a prisoner, and his care was the cage. I capped the marker. My goal was no longer to get into my father's room. It was not even to get justice for a bruise. My goal was to break the monopoly. Vivian had control of the money, the law, and the medicine, but I had a key shaped like a swallow, a contact in the basement, and a very clear understanding of the truth. I would build my own map, and I would expose every single connection. The swallow key felt cold in my palm, a heavy piece of silver that represented a part of my father I had almost forgotten. He was a man of contingencies, of backups, of hidden meanings. A quick search for the engraving on the key, a stylized sunburst, led me to the Sunvale Depository. It was not a bank. It was a fortress of gray granite and unmarked brass doors in the oldest part of the financial district, a place that prided itself on discretion. The lobby smelled of old money, waxed wood, and something metallic, like a vault. I presented the key to the manager, a man who looked as old as the granite. He examined it, then my driver's license, and disappeared into a back room. He returned a few minutes later and nodded, his expression unchanging. "This way, Ms. Dixon." He led me through a circular steel door that opened with a heavy pressurized sigh. We walked down a carpeted hallway, the silence absolute. He stopped at a small, gleaming silver drawer, used his own master key, and then stepped back, allowing me to insert the swallow. With a smooth click, the lock disengaged. He pulled out a long, narrow metal box and placed it on a nearby viewing table in a private, sterile room. "You may take as long as you need." He closed the door, leaving me alone. My hands were trembling slightly. I lifted the lid. There were no jewels, no bonds, no stacks of cash. There were only 3 items. The first was a small, black military-grade encrypted solid-state drive. The second was a worn, dark brown leather notebook, the kind my father always carried, secured with a simple elastic band. The third item made my stomach clench. It was my father's patient ID card from St. Bryn. I reached for the notebook first. I ran my thumb over the embossed Calder crest on the cover. I opened it. His handwriting, sharp and angular, filled the first page. It was not a letter. It was a protocol. At the top, he had written, "The 3 taps rule." My dream. The tapping. It was not a dream. It was an instruction. Below it, he had listed the steps. Tap 1. Verify. He wrote, "Do not act on emotion. Do not act on accusation. Act only on what you can prove. Get the facts, not the story." Tap 2. Backup. He wrote, "One copy is no copy. A single source of truth is a single point of failure. Secure everything, in triplicate, in separate locations." Tap 3. Publish. He wrote, "Do not strike when you are angry. Strike when they are vulnerable. Do not seek the loudest moment. Seek the right one. Timing is leverage." I closed my eyes for a moment. He had known. He had seen something coming. He had created this lesson plan, this arsenal, and hidden it away, trusting I would find it. I picked up the patient card. It looked normal. His name, Richard Calder, his date of birth, his patient number, but on the back, stamped in faint purple ink near the magnetic stripe, was an access code I did not recognize. 408B Farm, and next to it, a timestamp. It was from 2 days ago, the exact time, down to the minute. that I had been in the hallway arguing with Vivian, the exact moment the main camera was offline. Someone had used this card, or a clone of it, to access the pharmaceutical records for his room while Vivian was physically distracting me, pushing me against a wall. My suspicion of unauthorized access was now a verified fact. Tap 1. Finally, I looked at the SSD. This was the core. I had my father's rules, but this drive held his proof. It was encrypted far beyond my capabilities. I knew who to call. Ben Jacoby had been the head of IT at Marrow & Wick before he'd spectacularly quit, telling our CEO that his data security was a screen door on a submarine. Ben was a genuine cynic, a genius who despised corporate structures, which made him the only person I trusted. I met him at his new cybersecurity firm, which was a chaotic loft above a pizza place, smelling strongly of server fans and old pepperoni. "Autumn Dixon," he said, not getting up. He was thin, wired, and surrounded by at least 6 monitors. To what do I owe the pleasure? Did Marrow & Wick finally realize their entire client database is readable from a Starbucks in Ohio? "This is personal. Ben, it's off the books. It's my father." That sobered him. "What's wrong?" "He's in a coma. My stepmother is in control. I think she's fabricating his medical care and looting his company. He left me this." I placed the SSD on his desk, next to a tower of empty energy drink cans. He picked it up, examined the casing. "Military grade, AES 256. Your dad wasn't messing around. What do you think is on it?" "His verify pile." Ben looked at me, a flicker of professional interest in his eyes. "This is a 24-hour job, minimum, and it's not cheap. It'll be $500, cash, and you tell no one I'm involved." "Done." I pulled the cash from my wallet. While Ben worked his magic, I focused on my own. Tap 1 was not finished. I had the keep it quiet text from my anonymous source, but I needed more. The micro recorder I'd ordered had arrived. It was the size of my thumb, cold and metallic. I called Gregory Shaw, the hospital lawyer. I used the voice I reserved for damage control with high-value clients. Calm, reasonable, and slightly apologetic. "Mr. Shaw, Autumn Dixon, I wanted to apologize for our last conversation. I'm under a great deal of stress. As you can imagine, I'm just trying to get a handle on the administrative side. I wonder if I could bother you for 10 minutes to walk me through the Guardian Care invoices. I'm just so confused by the billing codes." He agreed, his tone saturated with relief. I was no longer a threat. I was a confused daughter. I sat in his beige office, the recorder on, nestled silently in the side pocket of my purse. He droned on about per diem consultation fees and administrative overhead. As he was shuffling papers, his desk phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, and a shadow of panic crossed his face. He picked it up. "Vivian, yes, I'm in a meeting." He listened, his face paling. "No, she's right here, actually." He flinched. Holding the receiver slightly away from his ear, I could hear her voice, a high-pitched, tinny shriek. "What is she doing there? I told you. All inquiries go through me. Are you an idiot?" "She's just asking about the billing, Vivian," Shaw stammered, wiping his brow. "Just the high-level codes. She's confused." "I don't care," Vivian snapped, her voice loud enough for the recorder to catch every syllable. "Get her out of there. We have an agreement. You keep things quiet. You do not let her cause any waves. Are we clear?" "Yes, Vivian. Perfectly clear." He hung up, his hand visibly shaking. He looked at me, forcing a weak smile. "My apologies. Where were we?" "You were just explaining the agreement," I said softly. I left the hospital with the audio file. Keep it quiet. I now had Vivian directly linking herself to the hospital's stone walling. That night, Ben called me. "You're not going to like this." I was back in his office within 10 minutes. The smell of pizza was overwhelming. "The good news is, I'm in," he said, pointing to a screen filled with file trees. "The bad news is, your dad was right, and you were right." He opened a file, It was a meticulously organized set of spreadsheets, a shadow ledger for Northway storage and freight. Your dad was tracking bad debts, Ben explained. Millions of dollars in defaulted contracts from defunct clients. They should have been written off years ago. Instead, they're still being carried on the books as active assets. He's inflating the company's value, I whispered. That's fraud. That's not the half of it. He was using that inflated value as collateral, but that's not what he was most worried about. Ben clicked to another folder, one labeled VH Crescent. He was tracking her. It was a flowchart, a stream of money. Your dad found a donation channel, Ben said, tracing the line with his finger. Money was moving from a Northway subsidiary account into the Calder Trust as a charitable gift, tax-deductible, of course, and then immediately being paid out. Paid out to who? He clicked again. The recipient was Crescent Meridian, LLC. The vendor I had seen listed under the Guardian Care budget, Vivian's shell company. She's laundering money, Ben said flatly, using the trust to wash Northway's profits, then paying herself a massive, untaxed consulting fee. And look at the dates. He highlighted a column. The payments were small and steady for a year. Then, 3 months ago, right after your father's stroke, they accelerated. She's emptying the vault. I felt sick, but Ben was not done. There's one more thing. Autumn, it was in a deleted partition. He must have written it and then tried to hide it. He opened a text document. It was a draft of an email. From my father, dated the day before his stroke. It was addressed to the entire board of the Calder Trust and to Noah Briggs. Subject: Emergency vote. Immediate revocation of power of attorney. The body of the email was a declaration of war. To the board. Effective immediately. I am formally revoking the temporary power of attorney granted to my wife, Vivian Hale. I have discovered significant, willful financial irregularities that compromise the integrity of the Calder Trust and the solvency of Northway. Her actions constitute a direct threat to this organization. We will discuss this in full and vote on her removal at an emergency meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. He never made it to that meeting. He had the stroke that night. My knees felt weak. She knew, I said, the words hollow. He was going to expose her. He was going to cut her off. And then he had a stroke. Ben, the timing. It's too perfect, Ben said, his voice grim. He was going to fire her. Instead, she got everything. I left Ben's office with a copy of the entire drive. Tap 2. Backup. I now had the motive. I had the mechanism. I needed tap 3. This was too big for me alone. I needed someone who could wield this information like a weapon. Aria Kelso. She was an investigative reporter for the Riverton Post, a hungry, relentless journalist who had made her name exposing charity fraud. She had taken down 2 major nonprofits in the last year. She hated the veneer of polite society, and she knew how to read a balance sheet. I sent her an encrypted email from a Proton account. I have documented proof of financial malfeasance, money laundering, and potential medical endangerment involving the Calder Trust and St. Bryn Hospital. Are you interested? Her reply came in less than 5 minutes. Who is this? Proof or shut up. We met at the back table of a crowded diner. She was all sharp angles and sharper eyes. You have 5 minutes, she said. I did not give her my name. I slid a file folder across the table. Inside was a single printout. The flowchart of money from Northway to Crescent Meridian. She studied it, her expression hardening. This is a hell of an accusation. It's one of many, I said. I have the spreadsheets. I have internal hospital audio, and I have the email my father wrote the day before his stroke, the one where he announced he was firing her. Aria looked up from the paper, her skepticism gone, replaced by a cold, predatory focus. You're Richard Calder's daughter. I am, I said, and I'm not just trying to prove a crime. I'm trying to save my father's life. I think she is keeping him in that coma to maintain control of his assets. Why come to me? Why not the DA? Because if I go to them, this gets buried in legal motions for a year. Vivian will destroy the evidence. And my father? He doesn't have a year. I need to make this public. But I need to do it right. I need the 3 taps. I placed a sealed envelope on the table. It contained a new, encrypted SSD. This is tap 2. It's a full copy of my father's drive and my audio file. I want to give it to you, not to publish. Not yet, but to protect. Arya looked at the drive, then at me. You want an insurance policy? I want a custodian, I corrected her. My father's rule was to wait for the right moment. I'm not there yet. I need you to be my independent witness. I need you to verify this chain of custody. If anything happens to me, this drive still exists. She picked up the envelope, weighing it in her hand. I'll do it. I'll have my paper's legal team log it, timestamp it, and secure it in our vault. It's a lockbox. You give the word, we turn the key. But, Autumn, she said, leaning in. This is financial. It's powerful, but it's not visual. To win this, you need to connect the money to the act. You need to show how she's doing it. She was right. I had the motive, the money, and the collusion, but I did not have the visual proof of the medical manipulation. I did not have the act itself. I thought of the patient card, the access code, and I thought of the anonymous text. 3:17 a.m., records room, floor B, St. Bryn. I knew what I had to do next. The trap had to be set on her territory. I could not risk her canceling or rescheduling, so I positioned the meeting as a concession. I need to understand your long-term plan. I had written in an email to her, CCing Noah. I've been emotional. I want to move forward. I'd like to hear your strategy for the trust. It worked. An invitation, a summons, really, appeared in my inbox 30 minutes later. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the Calder conference room. The conference room was on the top floor, a glass box suspended over Riverton. It was designed to intimidate, to remind you how small you were and how vast the Calder influence was. Vivian loved it. I arrived at 9:55. The micro recorder, smaller than my little finger, was already active. I slid it into the spine of my leather portfolio, a space I had cut into the binding the night before. I placed the portfolio on the massive, reflective mahogany table and sat down, my back to the wall, facing the door. Vivian swept in at 10:01, fashionably late. She was wearing a winter white suit that probably cost more than my car, her perfume preceding her like an announcement. Autumn, darling, so glad you're ready to be productive. She did not sit. She moved to the head of the table and activated the smart screen. I've prepared a small presentation on the stability plan. Given the unfortunate circumstances, our primary goal is to project calm and continuity, honoring Richard's legacy, of course. For 20 minutes, I listened to a masterpiece of corporate propaganda. She used words like streamlining, synergy, and strategic philanthropy. The slides were filled with stock photos of smiling, diverse children and gleaming office buildings. It was a presentation designed to say nothing at all. Very, very beautifully. When she finished, she smiled, the picture of serene competence. So, as you can see, we are in excellent hands. The ship is steady. It's very polished. Vivian, I said, my voice even. I leaned forward, as if in confidence. I did have one small question. I was reviewing the administrative budget, just trying to get a better grasp of the moving parts. I saw a vendor name I didn't recognize, Crescent Meridian. The payments to them are quite significant. Vivian's smile did not waver, but her eyes went flat. It was a subtle reptilian shift I had seen 100 times. A vendor, she said, waving a manicured hand. They handle complex asset logistics. Very dry, very boring. You wouldn't be interested. It just struck me as odd, I continued, keeping my tone light, inquisitive, because I also saw their name cross-referenced on some of the invoices from St. Bryn under your guardian care budget. The smile tightened. She was annoyed now, the mask slipping. The hospital's administration is a bureaucratic nightmare. Autumn, They require specialized consultants to handle the paperwork for a high-profile patient like your father. It's simply the cost of keeping things quiet and stable during a family tragedy. The cost of keeping things quiet. I felt a surge of cold triumph. The recorder was drinking in every word. Got it. Before I could press her further, the heavy glass door hissed open. Noah walked in, looking like he had sprinted from his car. His hair was slightly out of place, and his face was slick with a thin sheen of sweat. "Vivian, Autumn, sorry I'm late." He looked immediately at my portfolio on the table, then at the pen in my hand. He was here to run interference. "Noah, perfect timing," Vivian said, her composure restored. "Autumn," he said, turning to me, his voice taking on that false, friendly lawyer tone. "I'm glad you're here. This is an informal discussion, just family. Let's put the notepads away. No notes today. We can just talk, heart to heart." He was trying to poison the well, to establish that this was an off-the-record conversation. He was trying to neutralize any evidence I might be gathering. He just did not know my evidence was electronic. "Of course, Noah," I said, closing the portfolio, but I did not put it away. I kept my hand on it. I turned back to Vivian. "Actually, while Noah is here, I have one more question about the hospital." Noah's jaw tightened. I pulled a single sheet of paper from a different pocket of my bag. I had not put it in the portfolio. I placed it on the table. It was the service agreement for the ICU security cameras. "I was so worried about Dad's security," I said, "that I looked into the maintenance contracts for his floor. This is the agreement for Precision Digital Security. They took over the contract the day after Dad was admitted." "And?" Vivian asked, tapping a long red fingernail on the glass. "The registered agent for Precision Digital is a Mr. Darren Hale, your cousin." Vivian laughed. It was a brittle, airy sound. "Autumn, darling, Riverton is a small town, not a metropolis. People know people. It's a coincidence." "That's a very expensive coincidence." As I said it, the conference phone on the table, a sleek black triangle, trilled. Vivian glared at it, furious at the interruption. She jabbed the speaker button. "Yes, this is a private meeting." A woman's voice, bright and professional, came through the speaker. "Oh, hi. Apologies. This is Sarah from Peak Logistics. I'm trying to coordinate a priority manifest for a Mr. Darren Hale. I was told to reach him through the Calder Trust. I have a bill of lading here for Crescent Meridian." I held my breath. This was it. Aria Kelso, playing the role of her life. There was a pause, and then the voice of the Trust's receptionist, a young woman named Trish, filled the room. "Oh, sure. Crescent Meridian?" "Yeah, that's one of Mrs. Hale's family companies. It's run by her cousin, Mr. Hale. He handles a lot of her personal projects. Let me check if he's at his extension. Please hold." Aria's voice said "thank you," followed by the click of the hold button and a terrible, tinny burst of instrumental music. Vivian's hand moved so fast it was a blur. She slammed the end call button, cutting off the music. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating. I looked at Vivian. Her face, moments ago so assured, was as white as her suit. The polite mask was gone. She was staring at the phone as if it were a snake. She had been caught, casually, completely, undeniably caught by her own front desk. Noah looked like he had been punched. He was staring at Vivian, his mouth slightly open. He was realizing, in real time, that her coincidences were lies, and that he was defending a criminal. Vivian was the first to recover. She was a predator. She stood up, brushing an imaginary piece of lint from her lapel. She was already pivoting. "This meeting is over," she said, her voice a low, cold monotone. "Trish is new. She's clearly confused." She walked to the window, regaining her composure by looking down on the city. "Autumn," she said, her back to me. "I've been meaning to discuss the philanthropic restructuring. I am going to pivot the Trust's mission. We're going to focus on more public-facing initiatives, community arts, a new direction." She was changing the subject, building a new narrative on the fly, She was trying to bury what just happened under a pile of new, shiny projects. I stood up slowly. I picked up my portfolio. The small, cold weight of the recorder in its spine felt like an anchor. "I'm not interested in restructuring, Vivian," I said, my voice clear and loud in the quiet room. "I am going to tell the truth." She turned. The fury was gone, replaced by a sudden sickening mask of maternal sorrow. Her eyes welled up. It was a performance, and it was horrifyingly good. She walked toward me, her hands outstretched. She whispered, the word of perversion. "Honey, don't do this. Don't be like this. I'm just trying to keep this family together. Through all this pain, all this grief, I am holding us all up. Your father, Richard, he would not want this. He would not want this chaos, this anger." She was trying to make me the villain, the ungrateful daughter, destroying the grieving widow. I stopped at the door. I looked at her tear-filled, lying eyes. "A family doesn't need hush money contracts, Vivian," I said. Her face froze. I looked past her, at Noah. He was still standing by the window, paralyzed. He was a statue of a man. He would not look at me. His eyes were fixed on the carpet. I watched his hand, which was resting on the back of a leather chair. It was shaking. He knew I had her. He knew the words, "cost of keeping quiet," were recorded. He knew the receptionist's confirmation was a fact, and he knew, in that moment, that he had chosen the wrong side. I left the room. The heavy glass door hissed shut, sealing them inside their glass box. I walked to the elevator, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my hands were perfectly steady. The trap was set, the bait was taken. I had her confession, her motive, and her mechanism, all recorded on a drive no one knew existed. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a full 5 minutes, just breathing. The first clear win was mine. I was about to put the key in the ignition when my phone buzzed, vibrating hard against the leather seat. I picked it up. Another new message. The same unknown number. "Basement B, 3:17 a.m. tonight. Bring a light." I parked 3 blocks away from St. Bryn, my breath fogging in the frigid Riverton air. I walked, staying in the shadows, my sneakers silent on the pavement. The hospital's main entrance was a bright, sterile beacon, but it was locked to visitors after 9. I moved past the ambulance bay, toward the humming staff entrance. A gray metal door tucked away near the dumpsters. I had a code, courtesy of Chloe. The door clicked open, and I slipped inside. The ground floor at 3 a.m. was a different world. The bright cheerfulness was gone, replaced by a hollow, humming silence, the sound of ventilation systems and distant beeping machines. I avoided the main elevator bank and took the service lift, the one that smelled of industrial cleaning solution and stale coffee. I pressed the button for B. The elevator descended with a groan. When the doors opened, the change was instantaneous. The air was 10 degrees colder, damp, and thick with the smell of ozone, bleach, and something metallic. The polished floors of the upper levels were gone, replaced by raw, sealed concrete. This was not a place of healing. This was the guts of the machine. A deep, rhythmic thrum, thrum, thrum vibrated through the soles of my shoes. It was the hospital's main compressors, the heart of the building, and it was loud, a constant, industrial heartbeat that seemed to shake my bones. The corridor was a canyon of massive, insulated pipes and thick electrical conduits. The lights were caged bulbs, casting overlapping, nervous shadows. It was 3:10 in the morning. I followed the small, stenciled signs. Records Annex. Central Supply. The thrumming grew louder, a physical pressure against my eardrums. It was the perfect white noise to swallow a whispered conversation. I found the room. 14B. Records Annex. Just as the text had promised. The heavy metal door was propped open a few inches. Taped to the wall above the handle was a small, seminated sign. System under maintenance. MGEMT. And above the door, the small, domed security camera. Its tiny red light was dark, dead. I checked my watch. 3:15. I did not go in. I stepped back, melting into the deep shadows of a recessed utility alcove across the hall. I held my breath, listening to the pounding compressors, trying to separate the machine's rhythm from my own pulse. At 3:16, he appeared. He moved like a shadow, pushing a squeaking industrial cleaning cart. He was a small man in a rumpled gray security uniform, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. He looked up and down the empty, vibrating corridor. His eyes, dark and nervous, found my shadow. He did not jump. He simply gave a short, sharp nod toward the open door. I slipped out of the alcove and followed him inside. The room was vast and freezing. He did not turn on the overhead lights. The only illumination came from the sickly green glow of a single computer terminal in the corner. The room was a forest of rolling metal shelves, packed floor to ceiling with thousands of gray archival boxes. The air smelled of old paper and dust. He abandoned the cart and went straight to the terminal. "You are Autumn Dixon," he whispered. His voice was thin, almost lost in the mechanical roar. "You sent the texts?" He nodded, not looking at me. "My name is Miguel, Maria Ramirez. The nurse? The one they moved to pediatrics? She's my cousin." The connection, of course. "She knew my father," I said. "She did. She said he was a good man. She said what they're doing. It's not right. She told me to watch out for him, and for you." "What are they doing, Miguel?" "Lying." He tapped at the keyboard. "I'm night watch. Nobody sees what I see. They think I'm just part of the furniture. I see who comes and goes when the day shift doctors are gone." He pointed to a small printer humming beside the desk. A few pages scrolled out. "This," he said, handing me the printout, "is the raw access log from the server, not the one the floor nurses see. This is the real one." I held the papers in the green light. My eyes scanned the columns. Date, time, door, user. "There," he said, pointing a trembling finger. 2 days ago. Your father's room, 408. I saw it. 3 entries, one right after the other, at 2:47 p.m., the exact time I was in the hallway with Vivian. Access, V. Hail access, V. Hail access, unknown, Gray. "Who is Gray?" I asked. "He's not staff," Miguel said, his voice dropping. "He's not a doctor. He's a man in a gray suit. He comes with her, always. He carries a briefcase. She uses her card to badge him in. He never signs the visitor log. He goes into your father's room." "What else?" "This." He pulled a small black USB drive from his pocket. "A full copy, the logs for the 4th floor, and for the pharmacy." "Pharmacy." My blood ran colder than the room. "And this," he said. He handed me a standard-issue temporary keycard. The name V. Hale was written on the white stripe in black marker. "She has her official administrator card, but she uses this one, too. This one has different permissions." I flipped it over, stamped on the back, 408B Farm. The same code, the code from the card in my father's safe. "She has access to the pharmacy?" "Not just the pharmacy, the neurological sedative supply. It's in a digital safe in the basement stockroom. This card opens that safe." He turned back to the monitor. "One last thing. You said she pushed you." "Yes, the camera was broken." "The camera outside his room was broken. The one by the nurse's station. The angle is terrible. But it wasn't broken. They just aimed it at the ceiling." He clicked a file. A grainy, black and white video filled the screen. The timestamp matched. I saw the hallway. A bad angle. Mostly ceiling and the far wall. I could see the doorway of 408. I saw my own distant, blurry figure. I saw the shape of Vivian in her cream-colored suit. I saw the argument. I saw myself try to move past her. And I saw the shove. It was fast. I stumbled back, hitting the opposite wall, just out of frame. The figure in the doorway was a silhouette. "I can't see her face," I said, my throat tight with frustration. "I know," Miguel whispered. "Watch her hand, when she grabs you." He zoomed in, the image pixelated, breaking apart into gray squares. But it was there, the hand that grabbed my forearm. The light from the window caught the fingernails. They were painted a dark, glossy red, and on the index finger, clear as day even in the terrible video, was a large, distinctive chip in the polish on the right side. I stopped breathing. I had seen that nail. I had seen it just that morning, in the glass conference room. Vivian, tapping that exact chipped red nail on the polished table. Her face a mask of lies as she said, "It's a coincidence." Tap 1, verified. "She'll fire you for this," I said, my voice thick. "She'll do more," Miguel said, finally looking at me. His eyes were terrified. "They'll say I stole drugs. They'll ruin me. But Maria said, she said your father would have helped her. So I help you." "I will protect you," I said, taking the USB drive. I pulled a pen from my pocket and grabbed a slip of paper from the desk. I wrote down Aria Kelso's name and her private cell number. "This is an investigative reporter at the Post. She is holding other evidence for me, in a secure vault. If anything happens to you, if anyone threatens you, you call this number, you tell her your name is Miguel B., and you have the pharmacy logs. She will make you an anonymous source. She will protect you." He folded the paper, his hand shaking. "You have to go. They do a security sweep of the basement at 3:30. He was about to say something else when the world exploded in noise. A piercing, unbearable. Whoop, whoop, whoop blasted through the corridor. It was the fire alarm, deafeningly loud, echoing off the concrete and metal. A flashing red strobe light kicked on, plunging the room into frantic, pulsing bursts of red and black. "What is that?" I yelled over the siren. "It's not a fire," Miguel shouted, his face pale with panic. "It's a test. But they never test at night. They never test at night. It's an unscheduled sweep." Someone knew. Someone had seen me come in. Or it was the worst luck of my life. "Go!" he yelled, grabbing his cart. "The stairs. Don't use the elevator. They'll lock it down. Go left, to the east stairwell." We burst out of the room. He went right, disappearing into the noise. I went left, running, my footsteps lost in the alarm. The strobe was disorienting, making the hallway jump and twist. I didn't trust my pocket. As I slammed through the heavy door into the stairwell, I stumbled, crouched, and pulled up the leg of my jeans. I shoved the small, hard USB drive deep into my sock, jamming it against my ankle. It was secure. I ran up the 3 flights of stairs, my lungs on fire. I hit the door to the ground floor and spilled out into the lobby. It was chaos. Confused nurses in scrubs and a few terrified patients in robes were wandering into the hall. "System test, just a test," a guard was shouting, but he looked panicked himself. I did not run. I walked, fast. I pushed through the crowd, my head down. Just another person evacuating. I shoved open the main glass doors and hit the cold night air. The alarm was fainter out here, a dull pulse. I ran. I ran down the street, then the next, my keys clutched in my fist. I turned the corner onto the dark, quiet street where I had parked. I saw it from half a block away. I stopped. My breath hitched. My car was sagging. Both tires on the passenger side were flat. Not just flat, they were slashed, the rubber gaping open in obscene, smiling wounds. They had tried to trap me in the basement with the alarm, and when I had gotten out, this was plan B, to strand me, to catch me. I stood there, exposed under a streetlight, my blood turning to ice. My phone rang. The vibration was so violent in my pocket it made me gasp. I pulled it out. The screen lit up. Noah. My hand was shaking. I answered. "What? Autumn? Oh my God. Where are you?" He sounded breathless, his voice high and cracked with what sounded like real fear. "Are you okay? Get out of the hospital. Get away from there. Right now." "How did you know I was here? Noah?" My voice was flat, dead. I heard Vivian. She got a security alert, a breach in the records room. She said, 'It's her. It has to be her. Stop her.'" He was rambling. his words tumbling over each other. Autumn, listen to me. They're crazy. They called security to slash your tires. They're calling the police right now, saying you broke in, that you were stealing. You have to run. He knew. He knew about the tires as it was happening. He wasn't warning me. He was part of the cleanup crew. I hung up. I did not say a word. I turned, walked to the corner of the block, and stepped into the darkness of a closed storefront. I opened my rideshare app. A car was 3 minutes away. I watched the dark, empty street, watching my crippled car. The Toyota pulled up. I got in the back seat. Where to? The driver asked, half asleep. I gave him an address 10 miles away, in a neighborhood I had never been to. As we pulled away, I ignored the texts from Noah that were now flooding my phone. The fear was gone. It had been burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard rage. I sat in the darkness of the back seat. I pulled off my shoe, reached into my sock, and took out the USB drive. It was warm from my skin. I plugged it into the adapter for my phone. I ignored the door logs. I ignored the video. I clicked on the file. Pharmacy Access 408, Master. It was a spreadsheet. Time, date, user, action. My eyes scanned the entries, and there it was. User, V, Hail, Action, Access, Sedative Supply, Neurological Wing, Time, 14:48. 2 days ago, 2 minutes after she shoved me, while I was still reeling in the hallway. She went straight to the sedative supply. But the other entries were worse. 2 more, one from the week before, one from the week before that. Both entries. V, Hail, Access, Sedative Supply, Neurological Wing. I checked the times. Both were at 9 a.m. I knew that time. I cross-referenced my calendar. Both were exactly 1 hour before my father's scheduled neurological assessments, the deep dive exams with the chief of staff. The same exams that had come back inconclusive, the same reports that showed no change in cognitive response, the same reports Vivian had used to argue for minimizing stimulation and to start palliative comfort care only consultations. She wasn't just isolating him. She wasn't just stealing his money. She was drugging him. She was actively medically suppressing his brain function before every major test. She was intentionally keeping him in that coma. I got out of the rideshare 5 blocks from my apartment. The driver had been kind, pretending not to notice the woman in the back seat who was shivering on a mild night. I walked the rest of the way, the USB drive a hard, cold rectangle pressed against my ankle. The pharmacy logs were not an accusation. They were a death sentence. I let myself into my apartment, double-locked the door, and leaned against it, my heart a cold, heavy stone. I saw my father, not in the hospital bed, but at his desk, his eyes bright, laughing as he taught me a complex strategy in chess. You don't just attack, Autumn, he'd said. You build a position so strong the other side has no choice but to collapse. And I heard the echo of the dream, tap, tap, tap. The 3 taps, his protocol. I had been reacting, running, surviving. Now, it was time to execute. My anger, that hot, blinding rage, cooled. It didn't disappear. It hardened into something else, something cold, focused, and patient. I took out my laptop. Tap 1, verify. I had the logs, but they were just data. I was a PR strategist, not a doctor, to a court, to the press. They were just numbers. I needed them translated. I needed an expert. I did not trust anyone at St. Bryn. I did not trust Chloe, my resident friend, with something this toxic. This was not a favor. This was a career-ending risk. I needed someone untouchable. I called the only person I knew with that kind of power. Eleanor Pike. He's drugging him, I said, my voice flat, skipping the pleasantries. I have pharmacy logs showing Vivian accessing neurological sedatives right before his assessments. I need someone to tell me, on the record, what that means. Eleanor was silent for a beat. When she spoke, her voice was steel. I know a man, Dr. Samuel Aris. He was chief of anesthesiology at Denver General for 20 years. He's retired. He hates incompetence and he fears no one. You will meet him tomorrow. I will send the car. The next afternoon, I was in a wood-paneled study that smelled of old books and leather. Dr. Aris was a small man with fierce, clear eyes. I did not give him names. I did not give him the family drama. I just gave him the data. This is a patient file, I said. A male, late 60s, post-cerebral hemorrhage, stable but non-responsive coma. These are the pharmacy logs for his wing, and these are his neurological assessment schedules. Tell me what you see. He put on his glasses and read, his fingers tracing the lines. He spent a long time on the timestamps, his lips tightening. Well, he said, taking his glasses off, what I see is highly irregular. Irregular how? This, he said, tapping the entry for 9 a.m. This dosage, this is not a standard recovery protocol. This is a maintenance dose. It's high enough, and administered close enough to an assessment, that it would almost certainly suppress any latent neurological response. It would keep him quiet. Could it be a mistake? Once? Perhaps. A catastrophic, reportable mistake. But 3 times? Coordinated perfectly before 3 separate assessments? That is not a mistake. That is a methodology. He looked at me, his gaze sharp. This ensures the patient fails his exams. This ensures he appears to have no cognitive function. I would need to see the physician's signed orders to justify this. Without them, what is it? It is, at best, criminal malpractice. At worst, he said, his voice dropping. It's a deliberate, medically induced suppression. It's the opposite of healing. You're not trying to wake him up. You're making sure he never does. Tap 1 was complete. Tap 2, backup. I now had the most dangerous piece of information. I had to assume Vivian knew I had been in the basement. She knew about the tires. She would be moving to destroy the evidence. I had to move faster. I copied everything, the SSD from my father's safe, Miguel's USB drive, the grainy video of the shove, my micro-recorder's audio file of Vivian saying, "The cost of keeping quiet." I added a summary of my conversation with Dr. Aris. I put 1 copy on a new, encrypted drive and sent it by bonded courier to Aria Kelso's desk at the post. The package was marked, "Custodial hold. Do not open." I needed a lawyer, a real one, not Noah. Eleanor had given me another name, Helen Stokes. Her firm was small, elite, and specialized in hostile trust litigation. She was, as Eleanor put it, a civilized shark. Her office was all glass and white marble. Helen Stokes was tall, impeccably dressed, and looked like she ate men like Noah for breakfast. I did not give her a story. I gave her a presentation. For 30 minutes, I laid out the timeline, the financials, the medical data, the recordings. When I finished, she leaned back. "My God, you've been busy." "I need to move," I said. "I need to get her away from him. I need to freeze his medical records before she can alter them." "You're right," Helen said. "You have the what, she has the how. We need to take away her access. Tomorrow morning, at 9 a.m., I will file for an emergency injunction on behalf of Richard Calder. We will petition the court to have Vivian's guardianship and power of attorney suspended immediately, pending a full investigation, based on evidence of financial malfeasance and medical endangerment. We'll ask the court to appoint a neutral, third-party guardian ad litem to oversee your father's care." She was already drafting the motion in her head. "This will freeze the records. This will freeze the accounts. This will get her out of that hospital room." "She'll fight it," I said. "She'll say I'm a hysterical, grieving daughter." "Of course she will," Helen said, smiling a thin, cold smile. "But you're not a hysterical daughter. You're a prosecutor, and you've brought me a locked-shut case. She'll lose." Tap 2 was in motion. The legal and media shields were in place. I got back to my apartment just after dark, and he was there. Noah. He was waiting in the hallway outside my door, looking like a ghost. He was pale. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was wearing the same suit he'd had on in the conference room. He hadn't been home. Autumn, he whispered, standing up as I approached. I put my key in the lock. You shouldn't be here, Noah. Please, he said, his voice cracking. You have to listen. I didn't know. I swear to God. I didn't know about the medical side. I just thought she was protecting the assets. I didn't know about the tires. I didn't know until after I called you. She was laughing about it. She said it would teach you a lesson. What do you want? I asked, my voice as cold as the hallway. My hand, inside my pocket, found the new micro recorder. I clicked it on. I'm in trouble. Autumn. Real trouble. He was sweating, despite the chill. She knows you were in the basement. She knows Miguel helped you. She's framing him. She's planting evidence that he's been stealing sedatives. She told me to draft a letter to the hospital board, a legal notice, warning them about him. And did you? I asked, pushing the door open, not inviting him in. Yes, I had to. She had me. He ran his hands through his hair, his composure shattering. She said if I didn't, she'd have me disbarred for breaking privilege. She said I knew about the Crescent Meridian funds. I did. I helped her set up the LLC. I thought it was just a normal tax shelter. I didn't know she was funneling. All of it. He was confessing, a full, desperate confession, right here in the echo-filled hallway. She made you threaten an innocent man. Noah? A man who's going to be deported because of you? I asked, my voice clear and precise. I didn't know, he yelled, then dropped his voice, terrified someone would hear. I didn't know. You have to believe me. You have to help me. Help you? I looked at him, at the man I had loved, the man who had told me Vivian was trying her best. I'm not your life raft. Noah, save yourself. I stepped inside my apartment. How? He asked, his voice breaking. She'll destroy me. Go to the district attorney. Tell them everything you just told me. Tell them before I do. Give them your files. Give them Vivian. You might save your license. You might even stay out of jail. That's your only move. I shut the door in his face. I leaned against it, listening to him stand there for a full minute, silent, before his footsteps finally retreated down the hall. I saved the audio file. Noah Confession, MP3. Tap 3. Publish. The injunction would save my father, but it would be a quiet fight, hidden in courtrooms and motions. Vivian would use that secrecy. She would lie. She would paint me as greedy. Eleanor had called while I was with Helen. I did more digging on that Denver Children's Fund, the one Vivian bankrupted, she'd said, her voice grim. It's worse than I thought. The auditor who found the discrepancies, the one who recanted his testimony, he didn't just sign an NDA. He vanished. His family says he moved to Argentina. He was terrified. Vivian doesn't just buy silence. Autumn. She manufactures it. I knew then what I had to do. Vivian was a creature of the dark. She thrived in whispers, in backroom deals, in sealed documents. I could not let this fight happen in the dark. I had to drag her, and her entire machine, into the light. I sat at my desk and began to draft a new kind of strategy, not a legal motion, a press event. I called it the Calder Trust Community Forum, a return to transparency. I would invite the entire board of the Calder Trust. I would invite the entire board of St. Bryn. I would invite every major journalist in Riverton, including Aria Kelso, and I would live stream it. I spent the next 24 hours building the narrative. I was not a daughter. I was a whistleblower. This was not a family spat. It was a matter of public interest, involving a major community hospital and one of the state's largest charitable foundations. I built the press kit. It would be my Tap 3, a USB drive for every single person in that room. On it would be the Northway Shadow Ledger, the Crescent Meridian Financial Flowchart, the St. Bryn camera contract with Darren Hale, the audio file of Vivian, the cost of keeping quiet, the video of Vivian, the shove, the chipped red nail, the pharmacy logs, a one-page, signed affidavit from Dr. Samuel Aris, and a full, time-stamped confession from Noah Briggs. I would not need to say a word. I would let the data speak for me. I called Ben Jacoby. I'm running a live event. Ben, I need AV, but I need it to be bulletproof. I need redundant feeds, separate audio captures. I need to assume someone in the room will try to cut the power. A public execution, Ben's voice crackled. My favorite, I'm in. 2 days before the event, the invitations went out. The RSVPs from the press were immediate. The board members were silent. Then, Noah called. He sounded different. Not scared, resigned. I saw the invitation, he said. I'm coming. I did what you said. I went to the DA. I gave them everything. He took a shaky breath. I want to speak at your forum. I want to speak first. I want to tell them what I did. I owe you that. I owe your father that. Be there at 8, I said, and hung up. The final move came the night before the forum. A sleek black envelope was delivered by courier to my door. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of heavy cream-colored cardstock, Vivian's personal stationery. Her handwriting was a flawless, elegant script. Autumn, this public circus is beneath you, and it is beneath your father. It is a betrayal of his legacy. Cancel this event. Stop this madness. Do this, and I will personally nominate you to the board. Not as a non-voting commissioner, as my co-chair. We can run the trust together, as a family. Think carefully. This is your only chance to save what is left. A bribe, a desperate, clumsy, arrogant bribe. She was offering me the keys to the kingdom, if I would just let her keep the man who built it locked in his prison. I scanned the letter. I attached it to an email and sent it to Helen and Arya. The subject line was, Final Nail. I picked up my phone to call Arya, but she was already calling me. The board is panicking, Arya said, her voice sharp. No nonsense. The hospital's PR team is in full meltdown. You have them cornered. Autumn, the data is solid. The injunction will be granted. I know, I said. But you're giving them 24 hours notice. Vivian plays dirty. We saw it in Denver. She's not just going to show up and let you read her diary. She is going to come out with a knife. She will have a counter-narrative. She will have a witness. She will have a lie you haven't seen coming. She paused. Your plan is good, but it's not finished. The night before, you need one last ding-shot, one final, unanswerable move that she cannot anticipate. Arya's voice was low and serious. What is your last move, Autumn? I looked at the swallow key, still sitting on my desk. I looked at the old photo of my mother. I looked at the whiteboard, at the entire, ugly map. I have it, I said, and she'll never see it coming. The invitations to the community forum were live. The RSVPs from the press were a flood. The silence from the Calder Trust and St. Bryn boards was a deafening admission of panic. The clock was ticking. We had 24 hours. The first crack in the fortress appeared at 6 a.m. An encrypted message landed in my inbox from an anonymous, secure email. The sender's name was just Ellison, Mark Ellison, the finance guy, the numbers man on the board, the one who always looked terrified whenever Vivian spoke. I want full immunity. I want it in writing from your lawyer. I warned her. I told her this would happen. I forwarded it to Helen Stokes. Her reply was immediate. We don't promise immunity. We can only note his cooperation with the DA. Tell him. I sent the message. Ellison's reply came with an attachment. I don't care. Just get me out from under this. I am not going to prison for her. I told her the Crescent Meridian account was a blatant violation of our fiduciary duty. I have the emails. He had sent one, a single, damning thread. It was from him to Vivian, dated 2 months ago. Vivian, this Crescent Meridian accounting is unacceptable. It looks like self-dealing and will not survive an audit. We must terminate the relationship immediately. Vivian's reply, sent 1 minute later. Mark, your job is to handle the audit. My job is to handle the business. Do your job, and let me do mine. It was proof that the board knew, proof that they were complicit in their silence. I forwarded the thread to Helen and Arya. The second crack appeared at 9 a.m., just as Helen Stokes was walking up the courthouse steps. She received a call from an unknown number. It was the St. Bryn medical records manager. He was crying. He had heard about Miguel. He was terrified he was next. He spoke for less than 60 seconds. He confirmed everything. He confirmed that Vivian had authorized the access for her cousin's company. He confirmed that she had personally ordered the offline status for the camera outside my father's room. And he confirmed the most critical piece, that after I had been in the basement, access logs for the neurological sedative safe had been systematically deleted from the server. "She's scrubbing the system," Helen told me over the phone, her voice cold. "She's actively destroying evidence." "Does it matter?" I asked, my heart hammering. Miguel's copy just became priceless," Helen said. "She's not just guilty of the act. She's guilty of the cover-up. The injunction is filed. The judge is reviewing it now." The tremors were shaking the foundations. The stock for Northway Storage and Freight, which had been artificially stable, suddenly dipped. A rumor of board instability and financial irregularities had leaked. The stock dropped 7% in pre-market trading. The board, who had ignored my moral pleas, was now facing a financial catastrophe. Vivian, predictably, did not respond with silence. She responded with an assault. By noon, the PR war had begun. My social media feeds lit up. 3 of Riverton's most prominent philanthropy influencers, women who ran charity galas and posted selfies from fundraisers, suddenly began posting about Vivian. The narrative was suffocatingly sweet. "So saddened to hear that the grieving widow Vivian Hale is being attacked by her greedy stepdaughter during this time of tragedy," one post read, accompanied by a soft-focus photo of Vivian looking pensively out a window. Another, "A reminder that family comes first," holding my friend Vivian in the light as she navigates the unimaginable loss of her husband and a cruel, public family betrayal. Team Vivian. She was painting me as a monster, a greedy, unhinged daughter trying to steal her inheritance from a sainted, grieving widow. It was the exact narrative she had been building for months. My phone rang. It was Arya. "You see this?" "I see it," I said, my stomach turning. "Don't respond," Arya said, her voice sharp. "Don't engage. It's a tar pit. She wants you to get in the mud, to look hysterical. Don't." "I'm not going to," I said. "I'm a PR strategist, remember? She's fighting with emotion. I'm going to fight with data." I spent the next 2 hours drafting. I did not write a single emotional word. I created a simple, clean, 2-page document, a white paper. The title was A Timeline of Financial and Medical Irregularities, the Calder Trust and St. Bryn Hospital. I listed dates, times, and amounts, the flow of money from Northway to Crescent Meridian, the dates of the camera contract, the times of Vivian's access to the pharmacy, the times of the suppressed neurological exams. No accusations, no names, just the data. I sent it to Arya Kelso and the 2 other largest newspapers in the state. Vivian's team is floating a narrative. I wrote, "Here is a fact sheet for your reference. All data is sourced and will be presented at the community forum tomorrow." I hit send. I had countered her PR smoke with cold, hard fire. At 4 p.m., as Helen was fighting in court for the injunction and the market was in freefall, the third and final crack in Vivian's defense appeared at my front door. It was Paige, Vivian's personal assistant. She looked like a terrified bird. She was pale, clutching a simple brown shoebox to her chest, and she was visibly shaking. "I can't stay," she whispered when I opened the door. I can't. I have to get my car. I'm driving to my sister's in Oregon." "Paige, what's wrong?" "She's shredding everything," Paige said, her words tumbling out. "She's had a shredding service in the office all day. She's wiping the servers, and she's framing Miguel. She told Noah to plant pills in his locker. She's evil." "What's in the box, Paige?" She pushed it into my hands. "She's paranoid. She records everything, not just with the office system. She carries this, it's a pen, a recorder pen. She forgot it on her desk when she went to the hospital this afternoon. She's been so awful to me. For years. I copied the drive. My blood went cold. Copied it? She was on the phone with the hospital administrator, the one she and Noah always talk to. I heard her. I have to go. She turned and ran down the hall. I locked the door, my hands shaking for the first time that day. I opened the shoebox. Inside, there was a single, expensive-looking black fountain pen and a tiny USB stick. I plugged the stick into my laptop. There was only one file on it, audio 001.3. I pressed play. First, I heard Vivian's voice, cold and sharp. "This is not a negotiation. Gregory, this is a directive." Then, Gregory Shaw, the hospital lawyer, his voice tinny and weak. "Vivian, the board is panicking. The daughter is filing motions. We cannot continue this. The dosage. It's outside protocol. The chief of staff is asking questions." And then Vivian. Her voice was no longer the performance of the grieving widow. It was a low, venomous hiss. It was the voice of a despot, the voice of a killer. "I don't care what the chart says. I don't care what the chief of staff is asking. You are going to do exactly what I have paid you to do. You keep the dosage precisely as I've instructed. I want him stable for any and all assessments. I want no change in cognitive response. Am I absolutely clear? If I go down, you go down with me." The file ended. I sat there, the silence of my apartment roaring in my ears. This was it. This was the final, undeniable proof. This was not just suppression. This was a command. While I was processing, Helen called. "We got it," she said, her voice triumphant. "The judge signed the injunction, effective immediately. Vivian Hale's guardianship is suspended. A court-appointed ad litem is on his way to the hospital now, and they've approved the motion for an independent medical board to review your father's case. She's out. Autumn. She's lost control of him." I felt a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled me. He was safe. For the first time in months, my father was safe. "The forum is still on," I said, my voice hard. "Saving him was phase 1. This is phase 2. "Good," Helen said. "Now, go win the war." I sat at my desk. The forum was tomorrow. I had the financials. I had the medical data. I had the confession from Noah. I had the audio of Vivian ordering the suppression. I had the bribe letter. I had her. My phone vibrated. A text. The anonymous number. Miguel. "She's been removed. The guards just escorted her out. She knew I helped you. She told them I stole the drugs. They're coming for me. I'm running." My stomach twisted. "Miguel, go to Aria. The number I gave you. Go now." "I'm going. One last thing. For you, for your father. You have the money, you have the medicine, you have her words, but you don't have the final nail." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "Aria's warning. The one thing she can't escape. It's in the main family safe. The one in your father's study. The one Vivian controls." "I can't get in there," I texted back. "Vivian changed the code." "You don't need the code. The clue is the wooden swallow." He went offline. The wooden swallow. I stood up. I walked out of my study and into the living room. It was on the mantelpiece. It wasn't a statue. It was a simple, hand-carved wooden swallow. A folk art piece my mother had bought at a market decades ago. It was the only thing of hers that I had insisted on keeping in the main house after she died, and Vivian had hated it, but my father had refused to move it. I picked it up. It was light, almost hollow. "The clue is the wooden swallow." It wasn't a clue. It was the key. My hands trembled. I looked at the base. There was a faint seam in the wood. I pressed my thumbnail into it. The base popped off. Inside, nestled in a bed of faded red velvet, was a single, heavy, antique brass key. A key with no teeth, a manual override key. I went to my father's study, to the massive, ornate 19th century safe that was built into the wall behind his desk. the one Vivian now used as her own. She had changed the electronic code, but she had never known about the physical override. I found the keyhole, hidden beneath a sliding brass plate of the manufacturer's logo. I inserted the key. I turned it. There was a heavy, deep thud as the tumblers disengaged. The safe door hissed open. It was filled with Vivian's things, jewelry boxes, stacks of cash, deeds, but in the back, in a simple, locked document box, I saw my father's handwriting, codicil. I used the swallow key from the bank to pick the simple lock on the box. Inside was a single document, a supplemental will, a codicil to his main testament, signed and notarized just 1 week before his stroke. My eyes scanned the legal language, my heart pounding. And in the event that my spouse, Vivian Hale, shall be found by a board of medical ethics or a court of law to have engaged in any act of willful medical harm, gross negligence, or intentional fiduciary malfeasance that results in my physical or financial incapacitation. I read on, my breath catching in my throat. All rights, privileges, and inheritances granted to her in my primary will, including but not limited to her position on the Calder Trust, her spousal inheritance, and her power of attorney, shall be rendered null and void, as if she had predeceased me. She was disinherited. She had triggered her own removal. By trying to keep him in a coma to steal his money, she had lost everything. Attached to the document with a simple paperclip was a small, folded note. It was from my father. He had written just 4 words. Don't strike, illuminate. The Riverton Civic Hall was a cold, cavernous space, all acoustic paneling and harsh, fluorescent light. Ben Jacoby had set up 3 cameras, one fixed on the lectern, one on the massive 50-foot screen behind it, and a third aimed at the front row, where 2 sections of chairs sat conspicuously empty, placards indicating they were reserved Calder Trust Board and reserved Bryn Administration. The press section, however, was full. Every local affiliate was there, along with National Wire reporters. Aria Kelso sat in the front row, not as a journalist, but as a witness. Ben's laptop in the back corner showed the red live icon. We were streaming to thousands. I walked to the lectern at precisely 10 a.m. My footsteps echoed. The room went silent. I looked into the main camera, the one broadcasting my face to the world. Good morning. My name is Autumn Dixon. For the last 3 months, a story has been told about my family, a story of tragedy, of a grieving widow, and of a stepdaughter's alleged instability and greed. Today, I am going to tell a different story, and I will tell it not with rage, but with documents. I pressed the remote in my hand. The large screen behind me lit up. This, I said, is the Calder Trust. A clean flowchart appeared. This is Northway Storage and Freight, the asset it controls, and this is Crescent Meridian. A red line showed money moving from a Northway subsidiary into the trust as a charitable gift and then immediately out again. In the 90 days since my father's stroke, I said, my voice devoid of emotion, the trust has paid over $800,000 in consulting fees to Crescent Meridian. I clicked again. A new document appeared. This is the service contract for the security cameras on the 4th floor of St. Bryn Hospital. The vendor is Precision Digital Security. I clicked again. 2 state business filings appeared side by side. The registered agent for Crescent Meridian is Darren Hale. The registered agent for Precision Digital Security is also Darren Hale, my stepmother's cousin. I let the silence hang for a beat. These consulting fees were not for business. They were for surveillance and suppression. And this, I said, is what that money bought. I pressed a new button. The screen went dark, and the room was filled with audio. Vivian's voice, clean, sharp, and cold, from Paige's recorder. It's simply the cost of keeping things quiet. A man's voice, stammering, Gregory Shaw, the hospital lawyer. Vivian, she's just asking about the billing. And then Vivian, her voice a sharp command. I don't care. We have an agreement. You keep things quiet. You do not let her cause any waves. Are we clear? I stopped the recording. The sound of a dozen journalists typing filled the silence. I was not alone in uncovering this, I said. Some people, when faced with an order to keep things quiet, chose to risk their careers for the truth. One of them is here. I nodded to the side. The stage door opened. Noah Briggs walked out. He was pale, thin, and wearing a crumpled suit. He did not look at me. He walked to the second lectern and unfolded a piece of paper, his hands shaking. "My name is Noah Briggs," he began, his voice hoarse. "I was retained as external counsel for the Calder Trust. I am here today to read a sworn statement, a copy of which has already been provided to the district attorney's office." He read, "He confessed to everything. He confessed to setting up the Crescent Meridian LLC as a tax shelter, only to watch it become a vehicle for fraud. He confessed to drafting the threatening letters to Miguel. He confessed to participating in the cover-up at Vivian's direction, citing professional and personal pressure. I chose loyalty to my client over loyalty to the law," he finished, his voice breaking. "I was a coward. I helped conceal a crime. I apologized to Richard Calder, and I apologized to Autumn Dixon." He folded the paper and walked off the stage, disappearing through the side door. "The law is not optional," I said, my voice hard. "And the law is now involved." Helen Stokes stood up from the front row. She was the picture of calm, lethal authority. "My name is Helen Stokes, of Stokes Litigation. I represent the interests of Mr. Richard Calder. I am here to announce that as of 8:45 this morning, a district court judge has signed an emergency injunction." A gasp went through the press section. "Effective immediately," Helen continued, "Vivian Hale's guardianship and all associated powers of attorney have been suspended. A court-appointed ad litem is, as we speak, at St. Bryn, taking control of Mr. Calder's care. An independent medical board will be convened to review his treatment. Furthermore," she held up the court order, "all medical records and all financial accounts related to the Calder Trust and Crescent Meridian have been frozen, pending a full forensic audit." "The hospital and the trust did not just sit idle," I said, taking the lectern again. "They actively tried to stop this. They destroyed evidence." The main screen changed again. It showed a figure in deep shadow. His face blacked out, his voice electronically modulated. "My name is Miguel," the voice said. "I am an employee at St. Bryn. I am an anonymous source." He confirmed it all: the V. Hale card, the access to the pharmacy, the man in the gray suit, and then Ben's team displayed the log he had pulled. "The fire alarm," Miguel's voice said. "The one at 3:17 in the morning. It was not a drill. It was not scheduled. I checked the central security logs. It was a manual test, triggered from a security panel. They were trying to trap her in the basement." "This evidence was secured and time-stamped," I said. Aria Kelso stood. "I am Aria Kelso," she said, her voice carrying. "I am here today not as a reporter, but as a custodian of the record. I can confirm that my paper's legal team received encrypted, time-stamped data from Ms. Dixon and from the anonymous source Miguel B. prior to today. The logs, audio files, and financial records presented are identical to those in our secure, legal vault. The chain of custody is unbroken." She sat down. I had laid the foundation: the money, the confession, the medical evidence, the cover-up, the verification. Now for the why. I stepped away from the lectern, walking to the front of the stage, closer to the cameras. "Vivian's team, her paid influencers, have spent the last 24 hours telling you I am unstable, hysterical, a greedy daughter obsessed with her inheritance." I stopped and slowly, deliberately, pushed up the sleeve of my blouse. The lights were harsh. Even from the back row, the crowd could see the mottled, faint yellow and green stain on my forearm. "This is where it began. With this bruise, a push, they said, that I imagined, a family matter, a moment of grief." I looked directly into the camera. My voice was low, and it did not shake. I am a 27-year-old adult. I am my father's daughter. I do not need to be protected from my family. I need the rule of law. This bruise is not a family matter. The systematic drugging of a man in a coma is not a family matter, and the theft of millions of dollars from a public-facing trust, I said, my voice turning to ice, is not a magic show. The double doors at the back of the hall slammed open, echoing like a gunshot. Every head turned. Vivian Hale. She strode in, flanked by two expensive-looking lawyers. She was wearing a stunning blood-red suit. She was smiling, a wide, bright, confident smile. She ignored the press. She ignored the empty chairs of her board. She walked straight down the center aisle, her heels clicking a sharp, angry rhythm on the polished floor. She stopped at the very front row, looked up at me on the stage, and her smile widened. "Quite a performance, Autumn," she said, her voice clear and dripping with condescending amusement. "A wonderful magic show." She sat down, crossing her legs. I did not react. I did not look at her. I simply walked back to the lectern. "Thank you for joining us, Vivian." I reached into my portfolio. I took out the last piece of paper, the heavy cream-colored document, the codicil. I did not read it. I did not explain it. I simply placed it on the lectern, smoothing it flat with my hand. The camera zoomed in, capturing my father's signature. "This is the final document to be entered into the record," I said. "A supplemental will, a codicil, signed by Richard Calder 1 week before his stroke, and filed with the court this morning." Vivian's smile did not just falter, it evaporated. Her face went slack. Her eyes, wide with a sudden, dawning horror, were fixed on that piece of paper. She knew what it was. Or rather, she knew what it had to be. The one document she had torn his office apart to find. Her lawyer, a portly man beside her, leaned in. She whispered something, a frantic, choked sound. The lawyer's face turned white. He jumped to his feet, knocking over his leather briefcase. This forum is a disgrace," he shouted, his voice cracking. "This is slander. It is a violation of probate. We demand a recess. A recess, now." The room erupted. Reporters were shouting. I raised my hand. "We will take a 10-minute recess," I announced. Ben cut the main feed and the house lights, plunging the hall into a dim, chaotic twilight. I walked off the stage, into the darkness of the wings, exactly as Ben and I had planned. I heard her before I saw her. "Autumn!" Her voice was not a smooth, public drawl. It was a raw, guttural rasp. She grabbed my arm, the same one she had bruised, her fingers digging in like claws. "You think you've won?" she hissed, her face inches from mine. The mask of the grieving widow was gone. This was a cornered animal. "You think you're clever? You're a child. Stop this. Right now. Call off your lawyer. Retract. Tell them you were mistaken. Tell them you were overcome with grief." "It's over, Vivian," I said. "It is not," she spat, her grip tightening. "Stop this, and I'll give you anything you want. Do you hear me?" "Anything?" I asked, my voice quiet. "Half," she said, her eyes wild, bargaining. "Half of everything. Crescent, Northway, the accounts. Half. We can run it together, as family. Just stop this. You don't know what you're doing. You're destroying the family name." "My father's name, you mean?" "It's the same thing," she screamed. "Stop this. This is your last chance." I did not look at her. I looked just past her shoulder, into the deep shadows of the scaffolding. At the small, single, glowing red light. Ben's third camera. The backup feed. The one that was still live, still recording, capturing her bribe, her confession, her rage. I slowly raised my free hand. I pointed my finger, my hand steady, aiming directly at the lens. Vivian turned. She followed my finger. Her eyes tracked from my hand to the darkness, and she saw it. The red light. Her mouth opened. A small, choking sound escaped. The blood drained from her face. leaving a sallow gray mask of pure terror. She had not been making a deal. She had been delivering her own public execution. I pulled my arm from her grip. I stepped away from her, back toward the dim light of the stage. I looked directly into the backup camera, at the thousands of people still watching. "I don't want half, Vivian," I said, my voice clear and carrying across the silent, waiting hall. "I choose light." Vivian's face was a theater of collapsing expressions, terror, disbelief, and finally, a guttural rage. She saw the small, winking red light. She knew what it meant. The house lights slammed back on, blindingly bright. The room erupted. It was not shouting. It was a roar. Reporters were standing on their chairs, hands in the air, yelling my name, yelling Vivian's. Ben Jacoby's feed, which had been dark, now flashed to the backup camera. The entire room, and the thousands watching online, had just seen Vivian Hale, the grieving widow, try to bribe and threaten her stepdaughter in the shadows. Vivian stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth. Her lawyers grabbed her, forming a human shield, and began trying to bull their way toward the exit. They were swarmed. Cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved in her face. I walked, my legs steady, back to the lectern. I looked at the chaos, then back at the main camera. "The recess," I said, my voice cutting through the noise, "is over." The forum was no longer a presentation. It was an avalanche. The first boulder to fall was the hospital. Within minutes, a frantic email blast was sent to every journalist in the room. St. Bryn was in full panic. Their spokesperson, a man I'd never seen, appeared on a live feed from their lobby. He was visibly sweating. "St. Bryn Hospital," he read from a statement, "acted at all times in accordance with the directives of the patient's legally appointed guardian, Mrs. Vivian Hale. All medication protocols were administered based on her specific, written instructions, as the guardian, to minimize patient stimulation. St. Bryn has been, and remains, in full cooperation with the court." They had thrown her under the bus to save themselves. The second boulder was Mark Ellison. As Vivian was fighting her way through the lobby, a new email hit my inbox, and Aria's, and Helen's. Mark was not just cooperating, he was defecting, and he was bringing his own army. "She's done," his message read. "I am attaching the full, unredacted email chain. I will not be implicated in this." I nodded to Ben. The screen behind me changed. The backstage video of Vivian was replaced by an email. From Vivian Hale to Mark Ellison, subject, Northway vote. Mark, I don't care about the optics. I just need him stable. That means no changes in his status. Understood? Keep him stable until after the quarterly share vote. Once the new board is seated, we can revisit his palliative care. V. The room fell silent again, the financial motive and the medical command, connected in one damning email. "This," I said, my voice echoing, "is the guardian care Vivian was providing. She was not trying to heal my father. She was trying to keep him stable. Just long tapped out enough to secure her vote and solidify her control of Northway." The third boulder was Paige, Helen Stokes. Seeing the email, had already forwarded Paige's audio file to the DA, who had, in turn, released it to the press to confirm their ongoing criminal investigation. Suddenly, every speaker in the room crackled to life with that cold, terrifying audio from the recorder pen. Vivian's voice, not as a whisper, but as a clear, cold command. "I don't care what the chart says. You keep the dosage precisely as I've instructed. Push it through the nurse. It'll be quiet." That was the end. The sound of that file, that undisguised malice, was the gunshot that killed her public persona forever. The fallout was immediate. Within the hour, the newly formed Independent Medical Board, sanctioned by the court, released its preliminary findings. Their language was cold, academic, and utterly devastating. The board finds the patient's long-term sedative regimen to be inconsistent with restorative care, the dosage levels, particularly those administered prior to neurological assessments, exceeded recommended therapeutic guidelines by as much as 40%. This protocol was not designed for recovery. It was designed for suppression. The story was no longer about a family dispute. It was about an attempted murder, orchestrated slowly, over 3 months, with a drip bag and a clipboard. Vivian Hale did not make it home. She evaded the press at the Civic Hall, but she never appeared at her lawyer's office. She never went back to the house. She had vanished. By 4 p.m., the court had converted the temporary injunction into a permanent one. Her name was stripped from the Calder Trust. Her access to every account, Northway, the Trust, Crescent Meridian, was frozen. She was, in an instant, a fugitive with no money. The final piece of the puzzle came from Noah. That evening, he walked into the district attorney's office and handed them his final confession. A bank record. It was the wire transfer he had facilitated. $50,000, moving from a Crescent Meridian account to a private, offshore account belonging to Darren Hale. The payment was dated the day after my father's stroke. It was the receipt. The payment for the camera glitch. The payment for the blackout. The public, which Vivian had so carefully manipulated, turned on her with savage speed. The influencers who had championed her were now in a desperate race to apologize. Their feeds, once filled with Team Vivian, were now a flood of tearful videos. We are shocked, horrified. We were misled by a master manipulator. My heart is broken. I am sending all my love and prayers to the true victim, Autumn Dixon. I ignored them. I was not looking at my phone. I was at the hospital. The court-appointed ad litem was a no-nonsense woman who had already taken control. Vivian's guards were gone. The frightened-looking administrator had been suspended. I stood outside room 408. The door was open. Dr. Eris, the anesthesiologist Eleanor had found, was standing inside, reviewing a chart. He had been appointed by the new board to oversee the case. "Autumn," he said, nodding, his face grim. "We've started. The new protocol is in place. We've flushed his system of the maintenance sedatives. We're weaning him off everything unnecessary. His baseline vitals are strong. He's a fighter." "What now?" I whispered. "Now," Dr. Eris said, stepping out. "We wait. He needs rest. Real rest. Go in. Talk to him. It's safe now." I walked into my father's room. It was the first time I had been alone with him in 93 days. The room was quiet. The only sound was the steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor and the soft sigh of the ventilator. He looked smaller than I remembered, lost in the white sheets. I sat in the chair by his bed. I just sat. I looked at his face, at the lines of exhaustion. I cried, for the first time, not for the fight, but for the quiet, for the fact that it was over. After a few minutes, I took his hand. It was warm, but limp. "Dad," I whispered, my voice thick. "It's me. It's Autumn. It's over. She's gone. You're safe." I reached into my bag and took out the worn brown leather notebook, the one from the safe, his 3 taps protocol. "I found it," I whispered. "I found your plan. I followed the rules. Tap 1, verify. Tap 2, backup. Tap 3, publish. I did it." I gently placed his limp hand on the leather cover of the notebook. "I did it, Dad." His fingers lay still against the leather. I watched his face, searching for any sign, any flicker, nothing. Just the steady, mechanical breathing. I held my breath. I waited. And then I felt it. A twitch, a tiny, almost imperceptible flicker in his index finger. I stared, my heart stopping. Was it a reflex? A muscle spasm? I waited. And then, a faint, weak, but unmistakable pressure against the notebook. Tap. My breath caught. A long, agonizing pause. My eyes filled with tears again, blurring his face. Tap. He was there. He was fighting. He was coming back. I squeezed his hand, sobbing. My head bent over our joined hands. A third, impulse monitor. Tap. Autumn. His voice. It was not his voice. It was a dry, rasping sound. A single scrape of air across vocal cords that hadn't been used in months. I looked up, my vision swimming. His eyes. They were open, just slits, unfocused, milky, but open. He was looking at me. His lips moved, dry and cracked. Eight, he rasped, the word a painful, broken thing. Don't. Strike. I stared at him. The note, the codicil, the small folded piece of paper. Don't strike. Illuminate. My father wasn't giving me a strategy. He was giving me a philosophy. I looked at this man, this brilliant, broken man, fighting his way back from a chemical prison. I looked at the notebook, at the data, at the war I had just won. Aria Kelso published her story that evening. It was the front page, above the fold, banner headline story. The Gilded Cage, how the Calder Trust was used to medically imprison its founder. It was a masterpiece of cold, factual reporting. It mentioned the interstate wire fraud, the mail fraud, the conspiracy. Aria's final line read, "The Riverton District Attorney has filed charges, but sources say a federal investigation is now pending." I read the story on my phone, sitting in the quiet dark of my father's hospital room, his hand in mine, his breathing slow and steady. I had thought the climax was the forum. I had thought it was the codicil, the video, the moment Vivian saw the red light. I was wrong. I hadn't struck her down. I hadn't won by being a better fighter. I had simply turned on the lights, and in the sudden, blinding, inescapable illumination, the entire corrupt machine had been revealed. The climax was not the victory, it was the truth. The glass conference room. 1 week later, it felt different. The light was the same, streaming in, making the room a sterile, transparent box. But the oppressive, suffocating power was gone. The air was just air. The emergency meeting of the Calder Trust was called to order. Ben Jacoby was there again, managing the public live stream, a condition mandated by the court and Helen Stokes. The remaining board members, including a pale and silent Mark Ellison, sat at the table. I stood at the head, where Vivian had stood. I did not feel powerful. I felt calm. "This meeting is a formality," I began, my voice clear and amplified by the small microphone. "It is to ratify the facts that have already been established. The purpose of this transparency is not to punish, but to correct, to illuminate." I began, step by step, laying the entire architecture of the crime bare. The presentation on the screen behind me was not emotional. It was a cold, logical progression. "What?" I said, as the Northway to Crescent flowchart appeared. The financial mechanism, over $800,000 diverted from a company asset to a private shell corporation. 2, I continued, clicking. The Precision Digital contract appeared next to the Crescent Meridian LLC filing. The criminal collusion. The shell corporation was used to hire the principal's own cousin, Mr. Darren Hale, to manage security at St. Bryn. This management included the deliberate disabling of cameras. 3, I clicked, the pharmacy logs, laid side by side with my father's neurological assessment schedule. The Medical Act, a pattern of administering high-dose neurological sedatives in the 1-hour window prior to every scheduled cognitive test. This pattern is confirmed by the Independent Medical Board's preliminary report, which calls the protocol suppressive, not restorative. 4. I clicked. Page's audio file. The room filled with Vivian's cold, hissing voice. "I don't care what the chart says. You keep the dosage precisely as I've instructed." 5. I clicked. The codicil. My father's signature, large and clear. The consequence. A supplemental will, a codicil, notarized 1 week before my father's stroke, stating that any act of willful medical harm or fiduciary malfeasance by Vivian Hale would render her inheritance and all associated powers null and void. I finished. The silence in the room was absolute. Helen Stokes, sitting beside me, stood up. "Madam Chairwoman Pro Tem, and members of the board. Given this irrefutable chain of evidence, I formally move that the board vote to activate the codicil of Richard Calder, to permanently and immediately bind Vivian Hale from all duties, titles, and claims related to the Calder Trust, Northway Storage, and the Calder Estate, effective immediately. Mark Ellison did not hesitate. I second the motion. I looked down the table. We will vote, publicly, by roll call, Mr. Ellison? Aye, he said, his voice firm. Mayor Davies?
Aye.
Ms. Chen?
Aye.
It was unanimous, a clean, simple severing. As the word "I" still hung in the air, the double-glass doors at the end of the room opened. It was not Vivian. It was 2 uniformed police officers and a detective in a suit. "Excuse me," the detective said, his voice polite but firm. "We are here with a search warrant for all physical and digital records related to Crescent Meridian, LLC, as part of an active criminal investigation." The board members stared. This was no longer just a corporate restructuring. It was a crime scene. And then, as if summoned by the chaos she had created, Vivian appeared. She walked in behind the officers, her lawyers flanking her. She was not in red, not in white. She was in a quiet, expensive gray suit. She looked pale, exhausted, and sad. She was still performing. She was the victim, beset by police, betrayed by her family. She ignored me. She looked at Mark Ellison, her eyes wide with a practiced, wounded look. "Mark?" she whispered, her voice breaking, loud enough for the microphones. "What? What is this? I am his wife. I have done nothing but try to hold his legacy together while he is sick." She was still trying, after everything, after the audio, after the injunction. She was still betting on the lie. I looked at Ben Jacoby in the corner. He had the backstage bribe video cued. He had his finger on the button. I just had to nod. I looked at Vivian, at her desperate, lying face, and I remembered my father's words. Don't strike, illuminate. I shook my head, a tiny, almost imperceptible motion. Ben's hand relaxed. "It's over, Vivian," I said, my voice cutting across her performance. "The board has voted. The codicil is active. You're done." Her face, that perfect mask of sorrow, did not just fall, it contorted. The grief vanished, replaced by a flash of pure, reptilian hatred. She knew she had lost. The cameras, the police, the board, they all saw it. The mask was gone. She said nothing. She just turned, a stiff, robotic motion, and walked out of the room. The police officers followed her, not to arrest her, but to serve the warrant on her departing lawyers. The room exhaled. A man stood up from the public seating area in the back. It was Noah. He had been there the entire time, watching. He was not in handcuffs. He had given his testimony to the DA. He was a cooperating witness. "I just want to say one thing," he said, his voice quiet but steady. He was not speaking to me. He was speaking to the board, to the cameras. I helped. I was weak. I was ambitious. And I was a coward. I told myself I was just being a good lawyer, but I knew what I was doing was wrong. I believed the wrong person. He looked at me, just for a second. "Today, I am choosing the right side. I will accept whatever judgment the bar and the courts decide." He sat down. Mark Ellison cleared his throat. "Autumn, the board, in light of everything, we would like to formally move to appoint you as the new, permanent chairwoman of the Calder Trust." I looked at the faces around the table. They were looking at me, desperate for a new leader, for a quick fix, for someone to make this all go away. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Ellison," I said, "but I must decline." The room was stunned. My father's trust failed because it was opaque. It was a fortress, run by one person, in the dark. I will not be that person. I will not be the new Vivian. I looked at my notes. Instead, the board will immediately appoint a temporary third-party administrator to manage the day-to-day. You will also hire an independent, out-of-state auditing firm to conduct a full forensic review of the last 5 years. No more friends of the family, no more coincidences. But Autumn, Mark said, it needs leadership. It will have it, I said. I am establishing a community transparency committee. It will be comprised of 1 member of the press. Aria Kelso has agreed to serve. 1 member of the St. Bryn medical community, 1 member of the Northway Employees Union, and 2 members of the Riverton community. This committee will have full, read-only access to the audit. They will have oversight. I will serve as the coordinator for that committee, to liaise with the board, but the power, from now on, will be shared. We are not just cleaning the house, we are rebuilding it, with glass walls. It was a new beginning. The next day, St. Bryn Hospital issued a full-page public apology in the Riverton Post. They announced the termination of their contracts with Precision Digital Security. They announced the firing of Gregory Shaw and 2 administrators. They offered to pay for a new, independent rehabilitation facility for my father. I went to see him that afternoon. He had been moved from the ICU. He was in a bright room in the physical therapy wing. When I walked in, he was sitting up. A therapist was beside him, but he was sitting up on his own. He was pale and thin, but his eyes were sharp. He saw me. He did not smile, but his eyes fixed on mine. I sat beside him. We just looked at each other for a long moment. The board, I said, my voice a little thick, is clean. The money is secure. Vivian is gone. He nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. He looked at the small wooden table beside his bed. He slowly, painfully, lifted his right arm. It was shaking from the effort, but he placed his hand flat on the wood. I held my breath. His index finger lifted and came down. Tap. It was not a weak, frail twitch. It was solid. It was deliberate. Tap. I felt the tears welling up, and I smiled. Tap. He was back? He was himself? I saw Vivian one last time. It was 2 weeks later. I was leaving Helen's office, having just signed the papers for the new committee. Vivian was in the lobby, waiting for her own lawyers for a deposition. She looked deflated. The fire was gone. Her expensive suit hung on her. She was just a woman in a glass hallway. I stopped. I did not feel anger. I just felt a profound sense of finality. I gave you a chance, Vivian, I said, my voice quiet. In the meeting, before Noah came in, I gave you a chance to come clean, to stop. You chose to lie. She looked up at me, her eyes dead. You ruined me, she whispered. You took everything from me. No, I said, turning to leave. I just opened the curtains. You were already standing in the sunlight. The light did its job. Aria Kelso's final story on the scandal ran that weekend. It summarized the indictments: Vivian, for fraud, conspiracy, and felony assault; Darren Hale, for fraud; Gregory Shaw, for conspiracy and evidence tampering. Her final line was the one I would remember. In Riverton, a gilded cage has lost its power. The light is on, and the door has been left wide open. That night, I found myself, almost unconsciously, driving to the Calder Trust building. I did not go inside. I just parked in the garage, in the same concrete chill, under the same buzzing neon light. I sat in my car, listening to the silence. I looked at my arm, at the sleeve of my coat. I pulled it up. The bruise was gone, not faded, not yellow. It was gone. There was just skin. I pulled my sleeve back down. I had learned that when they tell you, she's just trying her best, the question you have to ask is, trying her best for who? From now on, the answer, the only answer, must be for the truth. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are listening from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Do not forget to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us extra support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.